This is a lacrosse field. This is a sixes field. Sixes games are shorter, faster, and higher scoring than traditional field lacrosse games. They're also more fluid. There are fewer players on the field, fewer stoppages during the game, and most importantly for the growth of lacrosse worldwide, fewer barriers to entry than ever before. You may have seen some sixes action in the past. You might even be familiar with the rules. But do you know why this version of the game was created in the first place? After all, we already had two established disciplines, field and box. Did we really need a third? With the 2025 PLL Championship Series coming up and the 2028 Summer Olympics in Los Angeles on the horizon, this video will explain not only how sixes is different, but also how it's designed to exponentially grow lacrosse participation across the planet.
Fresh 30 from Boston. Hold it. Boston, your champion.
To start, think of the first time you were introduced to lacrosse, or your favorite sport. Did you play it on a lined field, in full equipment? Were there any refs, and did anyone keep score? Probably not. Most future lacrosse players are introduced to the game in a structureless setting. Think having a catch in the backyard, throwing the ball off a wall, or shooting on an empty net. Basketball is no different. You can bet most NBA superstars played hours of one-on-one, horse, 21, or knockout before they ever competed in a full-court 5-on-5 game. Sixes is structured enough for high-level, intense competition, but it's far simpler than traditional lacrosse. Think about your aunt who keeps asking why some players have longer sticks than others. In field, you've got your 7 basic positions: attack, midfield, defense, short stick defense, long stick midfield, fogo, and goalie. Sixes combines most of those positions into one, leaving just field players and goalies. While field lacrosse contains certain players based on position to different halves of the field, with attackmen on one side and defensemen on the other, sixes cuts the overall number of players on the field at a given time by 40% and allows them all to run the full length of the field. Now, remember that aunt, the one who also gets confused as to why everyone sprints and dives for the ball when it goes out of bounds, but only after a shot? In sixes, possession is exchanged much more naturally. If the ball goes out of bounds, pass, or shot, it goes to the other team. If a goal is scored, forget the face-off. The goalie just picks the ball up out of his net and sends it the other way. The resulting game flow looks a lot like basketball on grass. Faster paced than field lacrosse and easier to follow back and forth. Your aunt can understand this, and so can all the other aunts in the world. This alone should help you visualize how the simplicity of sixes will break through with whole new audiences. But let's be honest, lacrosse needs more than just aunts and uncles to become a truly global sport.
Participation, how much of an impact does that have on our continual bids to be an Olympic sport, which will completely change the game?
For decades, the Olympic Games have introduced us to new athletes and sports, creating global superstars and fan-favorite events. Lacrosse has never been able to tap into that Olympic-sized audience, at least not during the digital age. The last time lacrosse was an official Olympic sport was 1908, and it hasn't been featured as a demonstration sport since 1948. But in 2028, thanks to the invention of sixes, lacrosse will finally return to the biggest stage in sports. To understand why sixes was chosen for the 2028 Olympics, you have to go back to 2018. Then known as the Federation of International Lacrosse, first formed a group to invent a version of the sport that could get approved by the International Olympic Committee. As a team sport, lacrosse was always behind the 8 ball when it came to Olympic inclusion. That's because the IOC puts a cap on the total number of participants in a given Olympics. Although that number is rising from roughly 10,500 athletes at the 2024 Paris Olympics to a projected 15,000 athletes at the 2028 LA Olympics, a traditional roster of 20-plus players would have immediately disqualified field lacrosse from consideration. By creating a version of the game that only required a 12-man roster, lacrosse could drastically improve its chances of gaining IOC approval. With that requirement understood as a starting point, the overall structure and format for sixes started coming together. By 2020, a full set of rules had received approval by a vote of World Lacrosse member nations. In 2022, the discipline was put to the test on an international stage. 9 different nations, the United States, Canada, Haudenosaunee, Australia, Japan, Great Britain, Israel, Germany on the men's side, and Czech Republic on the women's side, competed in sixes at the 2022 World Games in Birmingham, Alabama. The United States and Canada met in the men's gold medal game, with the Canadians winning decisively, but the story of the tournament was Japan's third-place finish.
Here we go. This is it.
On the world stage, Japan currently ranks 5th in field lacrosse and 8th in box. The fact that they leapfrogged more established nations to finish 3rd in sixes proved that the simplified version of the game could help narrow the gap between powerhouse countries and the rest of the world. In early 2023, sixes took center stage at the first ever PLL Championship Series. With some spicy additions, such as a 13-yard two-point arc and more contact, lacrosse fans and surely some general sports fans soaked in hours of sixes, as multiple games were broadcast on ESPN's linear TV channels. In the title game, Chrome Lacrosse Club topped Atlas 24-23 in a thrilling shootout.
The product that we saw on the field exceeded any expectation, and that's saying a lot because we have lofty ones here at the Premier Lacrosse League.
Between this championship series and the World Games, the IOC must have been impressed with what they saw, because on October 16, 2023, the committee approved 5 new sports for the 2028 Olympics: baseball/softball, cricket, flag football, squash, and lacrosse sixes. This decision was effectively a starting gun for lacrosse worldwide, as it immediately unlocked government funding for the sport in up-and-coming nations and gave every country a clear and defined goal for competition in 2028. But sixes wasn't created to bring just the international lacrosse community together. It was also designed to narrow the gap between the genders. Unlike popular team sports such as basketball and soccer, the men's and women's versions of field lacrosse are wildly different. The sticks are different, the equipment is different, the field size, number of players, flow of the game, penalty system, even the color of the ball, all different from men's lacrosse. These stark differences have always served as an invisible barrier between the men's and women's games. It's a nearly impossible task for casual sports fans to understand and enjoy both versions of the game. With the creation of sixes, one of the primary goals was to finally bring men's and women's lacrosse together under a similar set of rules. While some minor differences still exist when it comes to the equipment and the amount of contact permitted, the format and flow of men's and women's sixes are identical. We saw this on display at the 2024 PLL Championship Series, when 22 of the best women's lacrosse players on the planet were invited to compete in the first ever Unleashed All-Star Game. In that showcase, 2-time Tewarton Award winner Charlotte North scored 6 goals, including 2 behind-the-back scores, leading her team to an 18-12 victory and taking home the game's MVP award, proving that women's sixes could be just as electric and digestible as men's sixes.
What can we expect from the women's game moving forward?
Continue to move forward, continue to build on this momentum. We're ready to play. We're ready to continue to elevate the level of professional women's lacrosse on the whole.
Now we're about to witness the next evolution. On November 13th, 2024, the Women's Lacrosse League was officially launched. PLL co-founder Paul Rabel made the announcement on ESPN alongside 4 WLL player ambassadors.
So lacrosse is re-emerging back in the Olympics in LA 2028, and our version of lacrosse is sixes. So similar to rugby sevens, that's the format where we're launching the WLL under.
We all have such a love for the game and for the sport in general. To be able to just do a whole nother discipline, and such an exciting one at that, and one that we're going to see in the Olympics at some point, is just so exciting.
Since then, the up-and-coming league has introduced 4 teams, with 12 women on each roster. The first WLL games will be played at the 2025 PLL Championship Series in February, and you could bet these women will be fighting for their professional futures. With the recent suspension of Athletes Unlimited, the WLL is now the only avenue for women's lacrosse players to go pro. As the official Olympic format, sixes is arguably the future of lacrosse beyond the college level. But this is even more true for the women's game, which doesn't have established pro, field, or box leagues like men have with both the PLL and the NLL. Sixes, with the help of the WLL, provides a new and exciting opportunity for growth and harmony between men's and women's lacrosse. So, is lacrosse still the sport of the future? The key to growing the game is increasing accessibility, and when you consider the way structureless and simplified versions of lacrosse are reaching new communities, it's easy to see how this sport is on the precipice of an explosion in popularity. Consider this hypothetical path for a moment. A kid growing up in the Bronx attends a street lacrosse event and plays the game for the first time. He or she is immediately hooked and wants to learn more, so they seek out pro lacrosse. Their first exposure is watching PLL or WLL sixes at Champ Series. To them, it's more familiar than field, and it becomes the young player's preferred version of the game. Now let's say that player goes on to play in the NCL, a collegiate lacrosse league that mostly consists of HBCUs and only competes in sixes. They become an expert in the discipline since their skills and fundamentals were forged in it. From there, to complete the Hollywood ending, he or she becomes the first NCL player to go pro and ends up representing their country in the Olympics. It sounds like a fairy tale, but a few short years ago, it would have been impossible to imagine. And that's exactly what sixes will afford the sport: the opportunity for a future where lacrosse is everything we imagine.